I want you to picture yourself standing right in the center of a room.
Okay.
But this isn't just an ordinary room. It is completely filled, from floor to ceiling, with paper tags, millions of them.
Wow. Just suspended in the air.
Yeah, exactly, suspended everywhere. And as you try to walk across the room, these tags just cling to your clothes. They stick to your face.
Oh, that sounds incredibly claustrophobic.
Right, and here's the kicker. Some of these tags have your job title written on them. Some bear your really specific anxieties, like your feels about aging.
Right, or worries about how your colleagues perceive you.
Exactly. The persistent feeling that you aren't quite measuring up, and others carry all those heavy, unspoken expectations from your parents, your partner, your society.
Yeah, the things we carry around all day.
You are trying to navigate this space, but you are carrying the weight of 1,000 different labels. You literally can't see the door.
And you can barely hear yourself think over the constant rustling of all those constructed identities.
Exactly.
It's a completely suffocating environment. And the really profound tragedy here is that it is entirely self-generated.
Yeah.
We navigate our entire lives just completely draped in these labels, these heavy conceptual burdens, and we mistake them for absolute reality.
We really do. We assume that the tags stuck to us actually constitute who we are at our core.
We think the tag is the person.
And the reflex for most of us, especially if you are interested in self-improvement, is to try and organize those tags.
Right, like color-coding your anxieties.
Exactly. We want to sort the good labels from the bad ones. It is the defining struggle of modern information overload and psychological burnout.
It absolutely is.
So today, we are undertaking a deep dive into an ancient text that proposes a radically different solution.
A tool that does not organize the tags, but completely vaporizes them.
Yes. We are examining the Diamond Sutra, or in Chinese, the Jing Jing Yang.
It's a massive text.
It really is. For over 2 millennia, this text has fundamentally dismantled and rebuilt the minds of philosophers, scholars, and spiritual seekers.
It holds a really unique position. It's widely regarded as the absolute pinnacle of Mahayana Buddhist philosophy. It's often referred to as the King of Sutras.
The King of Sutras. That is quite a title.
It is. But what makes our approach today distinct is that we aren't treating this purely as a relic of classical religious doctrine.
Right. We are evaluating it as a highly precise psychological intervention.
Exactly.
And to do that, we've compiled a massive, diverse stack of sources for this deep dive.
We really have. We are looking at the foundational classical translations by legendary figures like Kumarajiva.
That's Wanzang, right?
Yes, Wanzang. Plus, we're bringing in the profound, highly structural commentaries from modern masters like Yin Shun and Nan Huaiqian.
Not to mention the classical treatises of Zhengzhou.
Right. But we are also synthesizing this ancient framework with contemporary psychology.
Which is so crucial for us today. We are examining how this text interacts with modern mindfulness-based stress reduction. Yeah, MBSR, pioneered by Jon Kabat-Zinn. And the radical psychological inquiry methods of contemporary teachers like Byron Katie.
So our mission today is really to serve as an icebreaker for this dense material.
We want to uncover exactly why this text commands such authority.
And how its central, heavily misunderstood concept of detachment can act as the ultimate antidote to the specific grinding anxieties of your modern life.
I think that synthesis is just highly appropriate.
Oh, for sure. The environmental triggers for human suffering have obviously evolved.
Yeah, we have emails and commute traffic now.
And complex corporate hierarchies. But the underlying architecture of how the human mind constructs suffering, how it traps itself in conceptual loops, that remains identical to what it was 2.5 millennia ago.
It's the same brain.
Exactly. And the Diamond Sutra offers the specific mechanics required to dismantle that architecture.
So to start dismantling, I think we need to look at the title of the text itself.
We do, because the English translation has created a massive, centuries-long misconception.
Yeah, let's unpack this. The full Sanskrit title is Vavarchaladika Prajnamaramita Sutra.
That's a mouthful.
It is. Now, when the average person hears the English title, the Diamond Sutra, they naturally visualize a diamond.
Right. They imagine a jewel.
Something completely solid, static, precious, and unbreakable.
They assume the text is declaring itself to be the hardest, most unshakable, ultimate truth in the universe, just sitting on a pedestal for us to admire.
But that is a huge assumption, isn't it?
It is the standard assumption, and it completely subverts the active, dynamic intention of the original language.
How so?
Well, if we analyze the Sanskrit word Vajrachedika and look at how the great translator monks approached it, a very different mechanism is revealed.
Okay.
In the early 5th century, Kumarajiva translated it to emphasize the absolute nature of the wisdom.
Right.
But in the 7th century, Xuanzang, scholar, who famously traveled across continents to retrieve the original Sanskrit texts, he rendered it into Chinese as the Ningduan Jinggang Sutra.
Ningduan.
Yes, Ningduan specifically translates to able to cut.
Oh, wow. That shifts the entire paradigm.
It really does.
It takes it from a noun to a verb.
Precisely. And we see this reflected in the 20th century when the brilliant scholar Edward Conze translated it into English as the diamond cutter.
The diamond cutter.
Yes, the diamond in the title is not a rock you put in a museum. It is a blade.
A blade.
It represents a scalpel tipped with diamond, engineered for a singular purpose: to slice through the most deeply crystallized, stubborn, and calcified illusions that the human brain can generate.
I mean, that is an aggressive metaphor for a tradition we usually associate with ultimate pacifism.
It is very direct.
If the text is a blade, then we, the listeners, the readers, we are the ones required to wield it.
Absolutely.
When you are sitting at your desk, overwhelmed by a wave of imposter syndrome that is just screaming at you that you're a failure, this text is not designed to be a comforting blanket.
No, it's not going to soothe your ego and tell you that you are actually very special.
Right. It is a highly sharpened instrument that you must actively turn against the false, terrifying narratives your own mind is producing.
And that discomfort is the point of the intervention.
Really?
Yeah. A comforting blanket wraps around your constructed identity to keep it safe from the cold reality of the world.
Okay, I see.
But a diamond blade cuts the constructed identity away entirely. It demands a high degree of psychological courage.
Because you're cutting away part of yourself or what you think is yourself.
Exactly. When you are caught in an anxiety spiral, your brain is busy building a massive, intricate architecture of what-ifs and should-haves.
We all know that feeling.
The diamond cutter does not rearrange the furniture in that house. It attacks the foundation.
It slices through the core assumption that the you who is worrying and the future you are projecting possess any solid, independent reality whatsoever.
That's exactly it.
Which brings us to the next critical word in the title, Prajna.
Yes, Prajna.
Often translated simply as wisdom, but based on our sources, it's pretty clear we are not talking about street smarts here.
No, definitely not.
Or being well-read, or knowing how to cleverly navigate a social situation to get a promotion.
It is entirely distinct from worldly intelligence. Ancient translators recognize this distinction so deeply that they frequently refuse to even translate the word into local languages.
Really? They just left it.
Yeah, they feared it would be diminished. In Chinese, rather than using the standard term for wisdom, ziui, they preserved the phonetic resonance of the Sanskrit.
Rendering it as bore.
Yes, bore. Worldly wisdom is additive. It is the accumulation of data, experiences, and strategic methods to satisfy the ego's desires.
Getting more stuff, more knowledge.
Exactly. But prajna is subtractive.
Subtractive.
It is transcendent wisdom. It is the raw, fundamental awareness that remains when you strip away all conceptual overlays and recognize the inherent emptiness of all phenomena.
So you do not learn prajna by reading more books?
No. You uncover it by systematically destroying your illusions.
Wow. And the final component of the title is paramita.
Meaning crossing over.
The metaphor is crossing from the chaotic, painful shore of endless conceptual anxiety over the turbulent river of conditioned existence to the shore of ultimate liberation and peace.
Right. So the functional title of the text is really the diamond cutter of transcendent wisdom that leads to the other shore.
That is a purely functional description. It tells you the tool, the method, and the destination.
It lays it all out.
And it sets an incredibly high, almost cosmic expectation.
He does.
So as a reader, you are preparing yourself for a revelation of galactic proportions.
You're expecting fireworks.
Exactly. You expect the setting of this discourse to match the magnitude of a diamond cutter of transcendent wisdom. You expect the Buddha to be hovering over a glowing mountain peak, surrounded by celestial beings just bending the laws of physics.
But the reality of how the Diamond Sutra opens is shockingly, deliberately mundane.
It really is.
It is perhaps the most grounded, anti-mythological opening scene in the history of classical philosophical literature.
Let's set the scene. The location is the Jeddah Grove in the city of Sravasti.
Yes.
The historical backstory of this location is fascinating because it contrasts so heavily with what happens next.
The contrast is the whole point.
So, there was a profoundly wealthy merchant named Anathapindika, a title meaning one who gives to the orphans and the destitute.
A very generous man.
Very. He is so moved by the Buddha's teachings that he resolves to purchase the finest piece of land in the kingdom to build a sanctuary for the monastic community.
He wants the best of the best.
Right. He identifies the perfect location, but it belongs to Prince Jeddah, the heir to the kingdom.
And Prince Jeddah has absolutely no financial need to sell, and he values his private garden.
So he attempts to dismiss the merchant with a price designed to be insulting.
He basically tells him to go away.
He tells an Ep1, I will sell you the land, but only if you cover every single square inch of the ground with solid gold coins.
It's an impossible sarcastic demand.
Totally sarcastic, but an Ep1 agrees instantly.
Without hesitation.
He marshals convoys of ox carts loaded with gold from his treasuries and begins literally paving the forest floor with money.
Just covering the dirt with gold.
Prince Jeddah watches this happening, utterly stunned. He realizes that any teacher inspiring this level of immense, unhesitating sacrifice must be extraordinary.
It completely changes his mind.
So the prince stops him, donates the remaining land and the trees himself, and they construct the retreat together.
So you have a setting established by unimaginable material wealth and grand spiritual devotion.
The ground is literally paved with gold.
And yet, how does the Diamond Sutra commence in this majestic environment?
It's striking. Out of all our sources, the translation of this opening scene reads almost like a ledger. It totally refuses to mythologize the moment.
It's just bare facts.
It simply states, it was time for the midday meal. The Buddha put on his robe, picked up his begging bowl, and walked into the city of Sravasti to beg for food.
Just a normal day.
He begged sequentially from door to door. Then he returned to the grove. He ate his meal. He put away his bowl and his robe. He washed his feet. He arranged his seat, and he sat down.
Putting on clothes, walking, asking for food, eating, cleaning up, washing feet, sitting.
The contrast is jarring. Why would the authors of the King of Sutras choose to open a text about ultimate universe-shattering wisdom with a detailed description of a man having lunch and washing the dirt off his toes?
Because the opening is not a preamble to the philosophy.
Okay.
The opening is the philosophy enacted in physical reality.
I love that.
The great master Nanhui Chen emphasizes this point heavily in his commentary. He points out that the ultimate truth is not found in spectacular miracles or mystical states disconnected from the world.
So no floating on mountains.
Right. The Tao, the ultimate reality, is in the ordinary everyday function.
Wow.
What the Buddha is demonstrating here is the flawless execution of the 6 paramitas.
The 6 perfections of a bodhisattva.
Yes. Manifested entirely within the confines of a totally mundane routine.
Okay, let's break down how eating lunch and washing feet constitutes spiritual perfection.
Sure, so the 6 paramitas are generosity, morality, patience, vigor, meditation, and wisdom.
Got it.
When the Buddha walks into the city to beg, he is enacting generosity.
Now, to the modern ear, that sounds paradoxical. How is taking food an act of generosity?
Right, it seems backward. But in the ancient Indian paradigm, offering sustenance to a fully awakened being was the highest possible method for a layperson to generate positive karma and merit.
Okay. So by walking door to door, the Buddha is generously offering the citizens an opportunity to cultivate their own goodness.
Exactly. He is practicing morality by maintaining the dignity of his vows, wearing his robes correctly, and conducting himself with absolute mindfulness.
This connects to a specific historical anecdote about the rules of begging that really highlights the paramita of patience and wisdom.
Oh, the story of the 2 disciples.
Yeah. The Buddha's senior disciples, Mahakasyapa and Subhuti, had drastically different and ultimately flawed approaches to begging.
They did?
Mahakasyapa, who abandoned vast wealth to become a monk, felt immense pity for the destitute.
He really felt for them.
So he would deliberately bypass the wealthy neighborhoods and only beg in the slums. His rationale was that the poor were suffering because they lacked merit, so he needed to give them the rare opportunity to offer food and improve their future karma.
A motivation born of compassion but rooted in discrimination.
Right. And then Subhuti operated on the exact opposite logic.
He did.
He would strictly avoid the poor neighborhoods and only approach the mansions of the rich. His reasoning was that the poor were already struggling to feed their children, and he refused to be an additional burden on them. The wealthy had a surplus, so he would only take from them.
And when the Buddha observed this, he reprimanded both of them sharply.
He did. He told them they were both violating the core principle of equality because they were operating from a mind that categorized and judged reality.
They were picking and choosing.
He mandated sequential begging. You go to the first door, then the second, then the third. You do not skip a house.
You treat the palace of the king and the hovel of the beggar with the exact same internal posture.
You do not select. You do not differentiate. You do not judge.
You accept reality exactly as it presents itself. That is the manifestation of supreme patience and wisdom.
It's a radical acceptance.
Furthermore, the Buddha demonstrates the paramita of vigor in the careful maintenance of his physical reality. Washing his bowl, cleaning his feet.
Doing the chores?
Right. And he demonstrates meditation and wisdom in the way he arranges his seat and sits down. He is completely, totally unified with every micro-action.
This really brings to mind the contemporary secular mindfulness movement, specifically Jon Kabat-Zinn's MBSR program.
The parallels are definitely there.
Kabat-Zinn extracted these mechanics to treat severe chronic pain and anxiety. His foundational premise is that mindfulness isn't about escaping a stressful life.
It's about being radically present while doing the dishes or sitting in traffic.
Right. But I want to push back here for a second. Is the Buddha's state of mind in this opening scene identical to someone practicing secular mindfulness?
That's a great question.
Because if the Diamond Sutra is just about being present while you wash your feet, then it doesn't seem like we need the diamond cutter metaphor.
That is a crucial distinction to make. Secular mindfulness, as practically useful as it is, often operates as a technique used by the ego to calm the ego down.
Interesting.
You're stressed, so you focus on your breath so that you can feel better and be more productive.
There is still a self trying to achieve a result.
Exactly. The Buddha state, as interpreted through the lens of Prajna, is fundamentally different. Thich Nhat Hanh discusses this beautifully in his commentaries.
What does he say?
When the Buddha washes his feet, there is no Buddha who is washing, and there are no feet being washed.
Wow.
There is only the pure, unmediated action itself. The conceptual boundaries between the actor, the action, and the object have completely collapsed.
So secular mindfulness manages the heavy tags we talked about earlier in that room, but Prajna recognizes that the tags do not exist.
That is a massive leap, but yes.
So for you, the learner listening to this, secular mindfulness helps you endure a difficult Monday morning meeting by keeping you anchored to your breath.
Which is helpful.
But the Diamond Sutra wants you to realize that the you who is attending the meeting and the meeting itself are empty constructs.
Exactly. The Buddha's ordinary routine is a demonstration of a being operating in the physical world without generating a single conceptual boundary.
And while the thousands of monks in the Jeddah Grove are quietly watching this routine, probably assuming they are merely waiting for the lecture to commence, one specific student perceives the profound, silent transmission that has just occurred.
Yes. Enter Subhuti.
Subhuti.
Subhuti is the primary interlocutor of this text. He is the one who finally stands up, uncovers his right shoulder in a gesture of deep respect, kneels, and poses the question that initiates the entire dialogue.
Subhuti's role is not arbitrary, is it?
No, his specific psychological and spiritual background makes him the exact necessary catalyst for the Diamond Sutra.
His mythological backstory provides a major clue here.
It's a great story.
Legend dictates that at the exact moment of Subhuti's birth, every single piece of gold, silver, and precious material in his family's incredibly wealthy household instantaneously vanished.
Just poof, gone.
His parents were understandably terrified and summoned a seer. The seer laughed and assured them it was a magnificent omen.
The vanishing of physical wealth symbolized that the child was destined to comprehend the ultimate emptiness of all phenomena.
Subhuti would eventually become the disciple recognized by the Buddha as being foremost in the understanding of emptiness, or in Chinese, Zhegongbi.
The mythological vanishing of the gold represents the sudden evaporation of conceptual attachments when exposed to ultimate truth.
And as a fun tangential fact, in the classic Chinese epic Journey to the West, the immortal master who teaches the Monkey King his magical abilities and names him Sun Wukong is named Patriarch Subhuti.
It's a deliberate literary homage,
suggesting that to master the fluid, transforming nature of reality, one must be guided by a master of emptiness.
Returning to the philosophical structure, though, Subhuti's decision to stand up marks a monumental pivot in Buddhist thought.
It represents the transition from the Hinayana path to the Mahayana path.
Let's explore the mechanics of that transition.
Yeah, let's break that down.
The Hinayana path, often represented by the figure of the Arhat, is someone who has achieved personal liberation.
They have recognized the emptiness of the ego, and therefore they no longer suffer. They have found peace.
Right. So, if Subhuti is an arhat, if he is already at peace, why is he asking a question? What is the limit of the arhat's realization?
That's the core issue.
The arhat has realized self-emptiness. They know the ego is an illusion. But because they still view the world as a place of suffering, they tend to withdraw from it.
They reside in a state of tranquil detachment.
Exactly. The Mahayana path, embodied by the Bodhisattva, views this withdrawal as incomplete.
The Bodhisattva realizes that because all beings are fundamentally interconnected, personal liberation is a paradox as long as others are suffering.
They vow to return to the chaotic, painful world to liberate all sentient beings.
So Subhuti standing up is the moment the mind that has achieved personal tranquility realizes it must now generate universal compassion.
He steps out of his personal peace and asks the ultimate question on behalf of everyone who is struggling.
And the question he asks is incredibly resonant. It is the exact question you ask yourself when you are lying awake at 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling, overwhelmed by the cascading thoughts of your own life.
It's a universal question.
Subhuti asks, for those who have set their intention on the highest perfect awakening, how should they abide their minds? How should they subdue their wandering thoughts?
In the classical translation, Yunhe Yingzu, Yunhe Jiangfu Kitin.
How should they abide? How should they subdue?
He is asking for an anchor.
Right. When the mind is racing, projecting catastrophic futures and regretting unchangeable pasts, what is the fixed point I can hold on to stabilize it?
What is the method to force the chaos into submission?
It's a plea for a technique. He wants a coping mechanism. He wants to know how to organize the sticky notes in that room.
And the Buddha's response is one of the most radical, counterintuitive, and brilliant philosophical maneuvers ever recorded.
The Buddha answers with a paradox that violently dismantles the premise of the question itself.
He does. The Buddha says to Subhuti, a bodhisattva must cultivate a mind that vows to liberate all sentient beings.
Whether those beings are born from eggs, born from wombs, born from moisture, or born from spontaneous transformation.
Whether they have physical form or no form.
The bodhisattva must vow to lead every single one of them into the ultimate, unconditioned realm of nirvana.
This first half of the statement establishes the absolute maximum scale of compassion.
You must dedicate your existence entirely to the welfare of others, leaving no one behind.
But then the Buddha delivers the strike of the diamond cutter.
He says, and yet, after having liberated all these infinite beings, the bodhisattva must realize that not a single sentient being was actually liberated.
Extirpating all beings, yet no being is extirpated.
It sounds like a deliberate contradiction designed to just frustrate the logical mind.
It absolutely does.
How can you expend massive effort to save someone while simultaneously holding the absolute conviction that no one is being saved?
It's tough to wrap your head around.
If you see someone drowning in a river and you jump in, risk your own life, pull them to the shore, and perform CPR until they breathe again, well, you objectively saved them.
Right.
They were dying, and now they're alive. To say no being was saved sounds either delusional or just coldly dismissive of the reality of that person's suffering.
To resolve this paradox, we must dive into the excellent core of the Diamond Sutra's psychological framework. The 4 marks, or the Xisheng.
The 4 marks.
The Buddha explains that if a bodhisattva holds on to the concept of a self, a person, a sentient being, or a lifespan, they are caught in illusion and are not a true bodhisattva.
These 4 marks are the foundational pillars of human suffering. They are the mechanisms by which the brain constructs the tags in that suffocating room we talked about.
We need to examine each of these marks extensively because this is where the actual surgery of the text happens.
Let's do it. Let's start with the first mark, the mark of self.
The mark of self is the deeply ingrained evolutionary illusion that there is a permanent independent I residing somewhere behind your eyes.
The ego.
Right. It is the feeling of being the CEO of your mind, the fixed protagonist of your life story.
But from a neuroscientific perspective, we know that this self is actually a rapidly shifting network of processes, memories, and sensory inputs.
Yes, the brain just weaves them together into a continuous narrative.
We suffer because we constantly try to protect and promote this fictional CEO.
We defend it at all costs.
So because I believe in this solid I immediately require the second mark. The mark of person.
Because if there's an I in here, there must be a you out there.
Exactly. The mark of person is the boundary line. It is the conceptual division between the self and the other.
It is the root of all comparison, all envy, and all interpersonal conflict.
Let's apply this to the Buddha's paradox about saving people.
Okay.
Let's say I mentor a junior colleague at work. I spend hours of my own time reviewing their projects, advocating for them to management, teaching them the ropes.
A good deed.
But deep down, I am firmly attached to the mark of self and the mark of person. I am secretly writing a script in my head where I play the role of the benevolent, wise mentor, and they play the role of the grateful, helpless rookie.
You have turned a dynamic interaction into a rigid conceptual structure.
Exactly. And here's where the suffering kicks in. If that junior colleague eventually succeeds, gets promoted past me, and doesn't explicitly credit me for their success, I am going to experience intense resentment.
You'll feel totally betrayed.
I will feel betrayed. Why? Because my primary goal wasn't actually to help them. My goal was to validate my mark of self.
The action was corrupted by your need to be recognized as the savior.
Right.
Nanwai Chen addresses this specific dynamic beautifully in his writings. He explains that true bodhisattva action is performing the absolute maximum amount of good in the world while leaving zero trace of the action in your own mind.
Zero trace.
You pull the drowning person from the river, or you mentor the colleague, and the moment the action is complete, the conceptual framework of I helped them dissolves instantly.
But wait, I have to push back hard here.
Okay.
Functioning in modern society literally requires the mark of person. You have a legal identity. You have a reputation.
Sure.
If I completely drop the memory of being a reliable colleague, if I leave zero trace of my achievements, how do I negotiate a salary? How do I build trust in a team?
It sounds totally impractical.
It sounds like you are advocating for a kind of spiritual amnesia that would make it impossible to hold a job.
That is a very common and very crucial misunderstanding of emptiness.
Okay, correct me.
Xingzhou, the brilliant 5th century philosopher and student of Kumarajiva, clarifies this in his treatises. Emptiness does not mean obliterating memory or destroying the physical world.
What does it mean then?
Xingzhou argues that Prajna recognizes that things exist conventionally, but are empty of inherent permanent nature.
So you don't forget it happened.
Right. You do not forget that you mentored the colleague. You simply recognize that the you who mentored, the colleague who was mentored, and the act of mentoring are temporary interdependent events. They're not solid realities.
I see.
You can negotiate your salary using the conventional facts of your performance, but you don't tie your existential worth to the outcome. You use the labels to navigate the world, but you don't believe the labels are you.
So you wear the name tag, but you don't confuse it for your soul.
Perfectly said.
That clarifies it. Now let's move to the third mark, the mark of a sentient being.
If the mark of person is the division between me and you, the mark of a sentient being is the categorization of the world into collective identities.
So groups.
It is the projection of traits onto groups. It is the source of tribalism, prejudice, and societal expectations.
This is where so much modern anxiety originates. Think about gender anxiety or appearance anxiety.
Absolutely.
We suffer because we fail to live up to the collective concept of what an attractive person or a successful professional is supposed to be.
We are trying to conform to a mark of a sentient being, which is just an aggregate illusion created by culture.
And finally, we arrive at the most complex and insidious of the four, the mark of lifespan.
Let's spend some time here because this is the architecture of time itself.
The mark of lifespan is the illusion of continuous linear time.
It is the belief that the self has a solid, immutable past that defines it, and a fixed, approaching future that it must either secure or dread.
Humans are uniquely capable of generating profound suffering over events that have not happened yet, or events that concluded decades ago.
The brain's default mode network constantly projects itself forward in time to anticipate threats, creating chronic anxiety.
When you dread a Monday morning meeting on a Sunday afternoon, you are entirely trapped in the mark of lifespan.
You are allowing a phantom future event to destroy your present reality.
Xingzhou wrote extensively on this. He argued that things do not actually move through time from the past to the present to the future.
Every moment is complete and sealed within itself.
The you of yesterday and the you of today are not the same entity moving along a timeline.
Therefore, the Buddha's directive, save all beings, but realize no beings are saved, is the ultimate application of the diamond cutter.
It instructs you to act with total, unreserved compassion in the present moment, but to immediately slice away the four marks.
Do not construct a self who is saving, a person being saved, a category they belong to, or a lifeline where this action will reward you in the future.
To illustrate how this is realized in practice, we have to share one of the most famous historical events in Zen Buddhism.
Oh, this story is amazing.
It is a story that directly hinges on the core teaching of the Diamond Sutra, and it perfectly contrasts the exhausting effort of managing your anxieties versus the liberation of cutting through them.
It is the story of Huineng, who would become the legendary sixth patriarch of Zen.
Right. In the 7th century, Huineng was an illiterate peasant. He lived in absolute poverty, surviving by cutting firewood